So we are gonna go through this presentation. As always, this will be up online on the CGIS website afterward as well. But yeah, I am going to be our moderator today. So my name is Callie Rouse, and we are going to be talking about how to be an ally abroad this week. So I am a intercultural programs advisor at CGIS, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Stephen Gonzalez. I'm the communication specialist here at CGIS, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
And I'm Ashton Troxel. I'm an intercultural programs advisor at CGIS as well, and my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. So why is allyship important? So allyship is a really huge topic to discuss. And it's not something that we can really dive in deep today, but we're really focusing in on the specifics of like, why is it important to think about allyship and being an ally to your peers when you are abroad on a study abroad program, and talking about some examples today. And so generally, why is it important to be thinking about? So one, it provides support to those who hold marginalized identities. And for those of us who hold marginalized identities, be able to support those with differing identities, support people with identities similar to our own. And also learning about experiences different from your own. This is a huge element of study abroad, is to learn about different experiences. And I think something that I learned on my study abroad program was that I was able to learn a lot about people from the US, as well as people from the Czech Republic, which is where I was staying. I knew I stayed with somebody, or I lived with somebody who was from Appalachia, which is a very different place from where I grew up in rural Iowa. And we had some conflicts at times, and we had to talk it out. And we would talk about food differences and all these other things, and in like treatment of people from Appalachia. And it was like so, interesting. And I think it's really important to be bringing that mindset with that not only are you going to be interacting and learning from folks in the country, you're going to be learning from your peers as well, and building empathy and gaining perspective from them on their experiences. And hopefully, if it's needed, being able to give them support if they face any challenges while abroad as well. So, types of privileges. So when we talk about, specifically like folks who face marginalized or have marginalized identities, what kind of privileges could you be going into the situation with that maybe your peers don't have? So citizenship is a big thing. A lot of your peers are going to be American citizens, and having that US passport is a huge privilege for entering a country, for being able to get around freely and things like that. Being cisgender, and having a heterosexual sexual orientation. Religion, that's generally going to be being Christian, but it may look different depending on where you're going to go. Maybe Muslim is the majority language in wherever you're going to. Ability, not being disabled, and not facing any challenges in that realm. Socioeconomic, that can be huge, especially with study abroad, which unfortunately does involve, thinking about a lot about money and being able to go places and where can you go and what limitations you're facing. Socioeconomic status can be a huge thing, as well as language, being able to go to a different country and expect that somebody else is going to be able to understand you when you speak in your language, or the ability of knowing another language, of going to Paris and being able to speak French with your peers and or your the foreigners and your peers as well. Whereas like not everybody may be really great with the language, or not know the language at all and struggle in that area. Can anybody think of any different kinds of privileges you might be coming in with? I'm trying to think of anything. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. So Stephen.
Thanks. It is really, I like seeing the all of the privileges like right there in front of you, because you really don't consider that when you're planning to go abroad, and how that might impact your experience. So what does allyship look like? These are just a few examples of what allyship could look like. So one, staying local, and that kind of resonates a couple of things for me. So suggesting local places that may be accessible to more of your peers. So that doesn't necessarily have to mean socioeconomic, worrying about, whether or not you do have to think oftentimes like, what are my peers doing? Because I think the big thing is that a big part of your experience abroad is everything that you're doing, but also building those relationships with your peers. So you definitely want to consider a little bit more about how to engage with your peers. So suggesting those local places that may have more access for your peers, and that can mean like affordability, but it could also mean, I think when I went abroad as like a 19-year-old who was not out yet, I really wanted to go abroad. I wanted my study abroad experience to be more about exploring who I was and being comfortable in my own shoes. And part of that meant going to like a gay club or like the gay neighborhood, right? Where I could finally like express myself in a way that I'd never felt comfortable doing home, in my hometown or where I was going to school. And I had so much support from my friends. They went with me. And I felt like I really did have that kind of support. But also, I think thinking about socioeconomic status, unfortunately, that you will find that there are a lot of people out there that can't necessarily afford the same thing that you can, right? I think especially coming to the University of Michigan, where a big chunk of our students they can afford to go abroad. There are some people that may fit into that small group of students that can afford to go on side excursions. So making sure that, you can include them will go a long way. Your host city will most likely have enough cultural activities for you to do. You don't need to leave every weekend, right? Especially if it's like a full semester. You've got 3 to 4 months to explore a country or other countries around that country. So just really take some time to explore those. Oh gosh, sorry, I don't know where that came from. So really take the time to consider how that might impact your peers. Eating out, again, go to places where your peers can be accommodated food-wise. There's a lot to consider. Some people may be vegetarian. Some people can't probably, eat what you're eating. So definitely think about restaurants, things that are going to be more inclusive of your friends. And then speaking up. And this doesn't necessarily mean, standing up and like having to make a big kerfuffle of something, right? Sometimes it comes in the form of just being there for your peers, but especially like noticing when your peers are getting discriminated against. That is so important to just be there for your peer. I know I was when I was younger abroad, and I got into, I was being discriminated against in a restaurant. I had a peer that thought I was overreacting to it and that I was creating a problem versus the other person who was actively discriminating against me was fine, right? And that made me feel, it was disheartening to feel that I wasn't being heard, which happens a lot here, even in the States, right? Like, too many times our voices silenced, or we're not taken seriously, or I could have figured out another way, to handle the situation, putting the blame on me versus the person that was actually at fault. But really, you just need to be a sounding board for your peers. You need, they want to feel supported, and they want to know that they're not isolated, right? It is an isolated feeling. We've had many stories, come from our students who have experienced just straight out racism, where waiters weren't actively wanting to serve them, and they weren't able, and I remember this one student in particular, she said that had it not been for her friends on the trip to validate her concerns, she didn't think that she would be in the right mindset to process all of that. And it's true, like that, being a sounding board for your peers goes a really long way. So just think about how you can help your peers out, like that. Next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit about some scenarios. I'll read these scenarios, and feel free to use the chat room to type in anything that may resonate, anything that you feel could have been done differently, anything that comes to mind. Feel free to use the chat. So our first scenario is, I saw that some of the students were discriminated upon through mean comments for low socioeconomic status, which was particularly hard to see because I am also a low socioeconomic status student and have worked very hard to undo the mindset that higher education is just for the elite. This totally resonates for me because this was me and my study abroad experience. I had to work like 2 to 3 jobs just to save up money to go abroad. So there were many times when I was abroad and I felt like I couldn't do more than half of the things that my peers wanted to do. And yeah, there were some people that were like, "Oh, just forget Stephen," or like, "We're all gonna go and it's not a big deal." And it was really upsetting for me to experience that.
I kind of wonder if people think that Americans traveling abroad are rich, like they're able to travel abroad because they're rich.
Yeah.
So they may not know how to challenge those beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is pretty wild to think that that is the mindset. Like, I think when I went abroad as a 19-year-old, I was probably from what I know, obviously not everyone is willing to share everything, but from what I gathered, it was like 2 of us that probably had jobs saving up for this trip, while everybody else's parents were able to afford for that, for their program, which good for them, but also like it's not always the case for everybody.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I like to super connected with Stephen there because I remember when I was a teenager and my mom was able to like save up money to send me abroad, but I only had this very limited fund. And I remember like everyone going out and getting gelato like so much. There was like so many times people get gelato and I would just pretend that like I didn't want any more gelato because I was like, I have gelato money. I need to eat money. And I think another element to consider here is that it can be really hard to speak up in this situation if you come from that identity yourself. It can be really hard to, be like, hey, like you shouldn't speak that way about these people, because you don't want it to reflect on you. You don't want them to turn to you. And so it can be really important for somebody who is of like better socioeconomic means in this situation to make a comment. And so it's not deflecting back on people who come from that identity to defend themselves. And I think in the same way of like not relying on your POC peers, fighting back against white peers who say racist things and putting them in that awkward position where they have to advocate for themselves. And when being an ally is really important here, if you don't come from that identity, being able to speak up without feeling like you're having to like be defensive and protective of like the identities that you hold.
Yeah, I think, I remember one time my friends and I, they were saying, "Oh, let's go to, we were trying to go to Bath in the UK. And I remember going to pull out cash from my debit card and my card got declined. And I was like, what is going on? And I remember looking at my phone and I had like negative $80 in my account. And I didn't realize, which meant I had already blown through like the chunk of money that I reserved for myself. And I remember telling one friend that I felt comfortable telling, and I was like, well, I have no cash. I can't go. like I can't go. And she's like, well, I don't want to leave you. And I was like, no, it's fine. You guys go, like you do what you never want to inconvenience other people. And she actually ended up staying behind with me. Well, her and two other people ended up staying. They were like, oh, you know what? No, we don't need to go. We don't need to go. But like, it was hard for me to speak up more about my socioeconomic status because I never want people to, the first thing is I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but also like it is so powerful to know that people know your situation or, the struggles of what you're going through, and you feel even more confident going forward. Yeah. Okay. So our second scenario. So I would get ignored over white women. For example, when I was standing at a counter for a couple of minutes trying to get help, I was totally ignored. Then a white woman walked up and was helped immediately, which was embarrassing because people noticed. Overall, preference for white people in this country, which I'm not surprised about, but it can be shocking at first, which is not even the case just in Spain, right? I think, like, again, having to acknowledge your privilege and your place as a white person in this world is significantly different than other BIPOCs or what other people from underrepresented minorities face. And unfortunately, this is very common in a lot of places. People equate white to wealthy, right? So that's going to be their main priority. These people think that they're going to bring in more men, they're going to generate more money, that they can offer more. So of course that is going to be where they're focusing their attention on. And it is, I've also been on this end of it, and it is very hard to navigate this, knowing good and well that and this has actually happened to me in Ann Arbor too. So it happens all over the place. And it is very disheartening.
So Stephen, based on what you just shared with us, you would prefer your white peer to say, hey, like I saw that happen. That was really unfortunate, but you wouldn't want them to like go up to the bar or whatever for you to like order for you. Like what would be the best way in your opinion to handle that situation?
I think in that case, I would appreciate an intervention. Probably. I think I would want someone to use their place of privilege to get the attention, because truthfully now as an adult, I have no problem speaking up to people. And I never want to come off as that person who's getting aggressive at the counter. And then suddenly like my coffee is made worse, or my food is like not prepared properly. Like I would prefer someone to intervene and say like, hello, hi, he's waiting, or he was first. Like, can we get him taken care of first before I have to get mad and then be that person? Because, and no one, especially people of color, no one wants to be that person, because that's what we think they expect us to be. And it's like, yeah, so I would appreciate, to answer your question, yes. Intervene for me, Ashton, please. Any other thoughts on this scenario? Cool.
I will add a thought. Sorry.
Yeah.
I guess we don't know the background of the student just based on the quote, other than they're not white. But it just kind of makes me question the historical context of that country, or different ethnicities or races looked at in a discriminate way because of colonialization, or due to some other historical context that we may not be aware of, and that the students should know probably before they go abroad, so they can understand the larger context in that society.
Yeah, I think when we were going over these slides a couple of days ago, and we talked about colorism and like how that plays too, like this could play in that whole situation too, because you could be in Mexico and you can have a wide range of people, people who were born in Mexico, but they are white, and certainly there is a hierarchy. And I know it's not even just Mexico, right? I think If you've seen, what is that show on Netflix that we've talked about, the Indian Matchmaker, right? There's a huge colorism issue that's taking place in India, and how it's, it's like I need them to be, a certain like shade of whatever. And yeah, that could certainly also be reflective of this person's experience. Cool. So we have this little chart for you all that actually Ashton made. She put this together. Should I explain it?
I mean, I can start and you can interject.
Yeah.
I think talking about societal like constructs, history, like politics, kind of segues into this. Doing your research before you go abroad is so important. I think as a student, especially when I was studying abroad, you could just Google like French culture, like how to travel in Paris, what to wear, and that seemed sufficient, but that's certainly not the world we live in today, and we need to be more educated so we can be knowledgeable and sustainable travelers and responsible, right? So do your research. Also research minority groups. I know when we were doing these slides the other day, we were talking about the Roma population in many European countries. And if you're a Southeast Asian descent student, you may be discriminated against, even though you're not part of the Roma population, but you look similar to them. So kind of understanding what that could mean for you before you go abroad. And then while you're abroad, supporting local. I know we went over some steps before, but choosing some stores, restaurants, cafes that are owned by minorities to just help them. You can also do that here in the US. And then visiting non-Western focused sites like the Great British Museum or the Louvre. Like a lot of that focuses on art that was taken through colonialization and imperialism. And, although that is probably something you might want to see because you want to see Mona Lisa, etc., also step outside the box and look into your city to see what other museums or attractions are there. I think, Callie, you had a good example for this.
Yeah, speaking to the Romani population, so I studied abroad in the Czech Republic, and where there is a decent, not a super huge, but a decent sized population of Romani folk. And I actually visited Brno on a day trip with some friends. And I saw that there was a Roma museum, which I thought was so interesting because, we generally don't hear much from their side of the story about the Roma. You just kind of generally hear very stereotyped things about them, about how they steal things, they warn tourists off. That seems like the narrative that generally Americans get when they're going to Europe. And so it was really interesting. I went to this wonderful, it was packed in, full of things museum, and it was run by local Romani people. And it definitely, I don't think, was the typical site and things like that people would think about when going to the Czech Republic or going to Brno in particular. But I thought it was super educational, and I was able to chat with some of the folks there who, when I asked, do you speak English? They were like, yeah, we speak this language and this language and this language. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. They spoke way more languages than I did. Were super great and stayed open late for us. And that's not something you're going to get when you go to the Louvre or something like that. But it was a really unique experience that I thought was really fascinating and taught me a lot more about that population.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think we talked about ask and listen and bystander intervention quite a bit when we were discussing the scenarios, so I won't go into detail about those, but I think, intervening or using your power sometimes is difficult, so make sure it's safe. If you don't know the host language well, it may not be the right time, but making sure you're checking in with your peers. One thing that you do have in common is that you're all adjusting to a new culture, and, having that human experience together, that is one thing you'll have in common.
And so lastly, a couple of resources. So I won't go into these in detail, but most of these are resources that are on our website that link you to things you can look further into, such as the Go Farther Together resources on BLM, LGBTQ, BIPOC, and allyship. The diversity destination guides from Diversity Abroad, or wait, no, not Diversity Abroad. I think it's somewhere else. Oh, it is diversity abroad. Okay. Yeah. And which can kind of get you to think a little bit more deeper about the places you're going. That was my cat failing to get on the table. I apologize. You okay, buddy? And of course, you can always go and talk to your advisor at CGIS, and we can chat with you about the specifics of your country, talking to you about like, hey, I hold these identities. What is that going to look like abroad? What things I should be aware of? And just thinking about this and listening to this presentation, I think is a definite great first step as well. So yeah, next week or 2 weeks from now, we're going to be doing Homestay Advantage. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and fear around the idea of staying with a homestay family. And so we're going to talk it out, and we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the homestay experience. And that will be same link, same time, as always. Awesome. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for attending today, and hope to see you next week. 2 weeks. Bye.